So are you ready to worship? Well, let's stand together, all right? I'm just kidding. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. If you were to come to New Hope, that's how you would hear the welcome every week. And here's the word that Frank's noted, Emil has noted as well, that is behind all this idea. It's simply the word intentionality. If you don't learn anything else, you need to learn this, that everything you do ought to be about intention. You shouldn't do anything just because we're supposed to or we ought to. You ought to do it because there's a why behind it. In fact, you need to answer the why before the what and the how. See, over the course of your time here, you're going to hear some great ideas. And the temptation is going to be to take those ideas and go home and this next week, if not this next week, week after, begin to do these things, right? Because it's about the what and the how. And your problem is, if you don't have the why, those what and hows will not work. You're going to think, what happened? It worked so good in that person's church and didn't work so good in my church. What's the deal? And the problem is, it's the why. You got to get the why right. Because if you get the why right, the what, how always follows through with that. So, here is a big why for us at New Hope. Acts chapter 15, verse 19. Remember, James gets up after Paul and Silas have explained these miraculous things. In fact, if you've never read this chapter or haven't read it in a while, you ought to go home and read it. I was actually in the Sabbath School quarterly this past summer, and I was at a different church, and they asked me to teach Sabbath School. And to a person in that group, they all said, wow, that has everything to do with what we're currently involved with right at the church today. Because there was a lot of clear stuff about what ought to take place. And then Paul and Silas talk and say, while the Bible says that, there's something else we need to think about. And that's how God is moving in people's lives. And so really, we should not make it difficult for those who are turning to God. And that's one of our whys. Because of that, we do a lot. We're intentional about a lot of the things we do because we don't want to make it difficult. So, if you want nons, how many of you want nons? Raise your hand. You want nons. You want non-Adventists in your church, right? You want non-Christians in your church, right? You want nons who have no idea what's going on, right? And if you want them, you have to be intentional about meeting them and not making it difficult for them. And so you have to recognize their presence. In fact, here's some things. First of all, you got to make it a safe place. So let's be honest. That's the hardest thing to do. Because you got somebody in your church who just loves to get up and talk about those Catholics, right? Or somebody who loves to make them feel uncomfortable. You can't dress to church like that today? We don't come, this is God's house. You don't come in like this, right? And so it is hard to make it safe. But if you want nons, you have to make it safe for them. You have to be intentional about that. Secondly, you got to watch your language. I went to PUC. Anybody else go to PUC here? All right, yeah, PUC, all right. Some of you went to Wahoo when it was called CUC, right? How many of those here? Right? Some of you went to Oakwood. How many Oakwood folks we got in the house? There we go, all right. Some of you went to Andrews. Anybody Andrews? Southern, Southwestern, Union, Walla Walla, and all the others. Anybody others in this room? All right, some others, all right. I don't know where you're at, but hey, some of you had AYS this last Sabbath, right? Some of you had Pathfinders and went to Camp Free. How many had Pathfinders go to Camp Free? Right? And best of all, happy Sabbath. We've just had a great conversation for Adventists. For a non, what you've told them is, you don't really belong here. Because we have our inside language. And if you don't understand our inside language, you're going to have a hard time. So you got to watch your language. That doesn't mean you can't talk about these things. We talk about our path. We have a great Pathfinder group. A group that is led by people who committed, number one goal for our Pathfinder is that they know that they are loved by God and they have an adult, a person of influence in their life. That's the whole job of Pathfinder. It's not to get the little awards. I wasn't a Pathfinder, so I don't even know what they're called. What are they called? Honors. It isn't about honors. Those are great things. It isn't about all the drilling and all that. Those are great things. But the most important things our kids need to know is that God loves them. And because of that, we'll get up and talk about our Pathfinders because we have a great co-ed Christian scouting group. Because we want them to know what we're talking about. So you can use your language, just explain your language, right? If you want nons, you also have to lean towards, not away from them. What I mean by that is recognize their presence. In fact, when you're speaking, make sure early on you know they're present there. Tell them you're glad they're there today. And lay out the expectations. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment when we talk about preaching. Let them know you're there and you're happy they're there. Because sometimes we let them know they're there. Any of you still use the little roses? Anybody still use roses? That's heartwarming to me. When I first started attending the Adventist church, they put a little rose on you when you came into the foyer. That was the signal you did not belong here. It was a way to say, oh, you got a rose. That must mean you're a visitor, right? Oh, and so we got to find out. Try to lower those things. Don't try to separate those things. Just tell them you're glad they're there and you're happy they're there. And if you want nons, you have to let go of the ideal and live in the real. We have this ideal that we're going to take our church deeper and deeper. And every Sabbath is about us diving deeper and deeper and deeper into the Word of God. And we're going to get everybody on the same page. We're going to have this mighty force. It's like going to the pool and everybody swimming in the deep end, learning the advanced techniques. If you want none, you have to help them have something at the shallow end, and you got to have something for the deep end. But you got to get them prepared for the deep end. You just don't throw them. You got to let go of this ideal that everybody's going to be on the same level, because if everybody's on the same level at your church is not doing what it should be doing. Emo, I thought you got them warmed up for me. I'm used to a group that responds. They're all just sitting there looking at me today. You got to embrace the mess. It is messy dealing with non. But here's the truth of the matter. It is messy dealing with Adventists. So if it's going to be messy, you might as well let it be messy on something worthwhile and something good. All right? All right, here's our approach. Sabbath is our most important evangelistic meeting for us as a church. In fact, it is the time that at a minimum, the pastoral staff spending 5 hours a day on Sabbath. Oftentimes we're at 8 or 9 hours a day, because that's the time. We are a commuter church. We have less than 5% of our population that lives within a 5 minute or 10 minutes from our church. The vast majority of people drive past your church and your church and your church and your church to come to my church. And I'm not trying to do that, because we have a class called Entrance to New Hope that if you put in for a transfer to my church, you have to go to this class before we put your transfer through. And it's a chance for us to say, this is who we are. This is what New Hope is about. And we want you to know who we are before we kind of make this relationship. And if you like who we are, that's great. If you don't, this is not the place for you. And we tell them. We're not looking for more Adventists to come to New Hope. I'm glad you're coming, but if you want to come, we're here to reach our community. So this is not about moving Adventists around. This is about reaching our community. So if you like that, get on board. And so we see this as the prime evangelistic opportunities. Every Sabbath, we will have a bunch of nons in our church. We always have non-Adventists. We always have non-Christians. I regularly have Muslims. I regularly have Hindus. We've had a Buddhist. We've had some other things that I'm not even sure what they are. And you got to have those things, and you got to be aware of those things. So, our approach, look over here. Our approach affects how we talk, how we treat, and how we touch. And when I say touch, it's not that creepy kind of touch. It's just about how we impact somebody's life, right? I'm just trying to stick with the T's, all right? So how we talk, how we treat, and how we touch. So let's look at talk. All we do at New Hope with our preaching is we do message series. And the reason we do message series is so we don't have to say everything in one setting. You ever try to do that? You're talking about the sanctuary. You got to cover everything in that 30 minutes, which ends up being about 50 minutes because there's just too much stuff to cover, right? But if you do a message series, you start and you cover a little bit. And you tell people, come back. We're going to take the next step next week. And the next week, you go a little bit farther. Most of our series, the shortest one we've ever done is 2 weeks, and that's pretty rare. Most are from 3 to 6 weeks. Occasionally we'll do 8 weeks. That's about the top, and you got to be really good. You got to have really something. People do that. But the reason we do message series is we think there's important things that we come back to every year. Every year we will do a relationship series. We either talk about dating, we will talk about marriage, or we'll talk about parenting. Every year we'll do a series on rest and the Sabbath and how important that is, and how, especially in this area where we live between DC and Baltimore, and how busy people are, how important that whole concept of Sabbath and how it enters into, and how we have to make sure it enters into things. Every year we will do a series on one of the books of the Bible. Every year we'll pick another topic that's of importance. We'll talk about generosity. We'll talk about finance. We talk about things that people are asking the question, how does this work? How does this whole faith thing work out in my life? And here's the question I have for you as you think about the message series you preach. Are you answering questions no one is asking? That's as good as it gets, by the way, folks. It's not getting any deeper, any harder than that, all right? But are you answering questions no one is asking? Because oftentimes, if we're honest, we are dealing with stuff we've just discovered this in the Bible, and it's so meaningful and good, and it's so deep. And people are just thinking, how am I going to pay my bill? How am I going to pay my rent on Monday? How am I going to keep this relationship together, this marriage together, when we both are having issues we both really don't want to be in any longer? And that's not to say that you spend all your time on that, but it's important to recognize that oftentimes we're answering questions no one's asking. See, if you fail to answer the so what, you fail to answer the most important question. We spend so much time on the what. We forget the so what. I mean, the sanctuary is this great teaching we have. But so what? So what if I can define what the golden candlesticks are and the oil that goes in and the shewbread and all the different details? What's the so what for me? How is that so what going to impact my life? How's it going to help my life this week? And the great thing is there's a way to do that. But it's about asking yourself why. Why am I sharing this? What is the purpose behind this? See, spiritual growth and maturity is always gauged by application, by what people do, not what they know. And our problem as Seventh-day Adventists is we are all about knowing. And our problem is we have taken that statement, I have the truth, and we become comfortable in it. We've become set in our ways in it. When the more important thing we ought to be asking ourselves is, does the truth have me? And so we are all about application. Because information without transformation is just clogging up your mind. It is filling up space that is much more valuable in different things. I don't know where to point this thing. Herbert Simon, a great cognitive psychologist, he said this one time, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. And we have a poverty of attention because we have a wealth of information, right? And we think we got to pile it all on and more and more and more. When what would happen if we gave less and gave less the space it needed for God to use that and to do some work in our lives? This is a statement from Andy Stanley, a Baptist pastor down in Atlanta, that has really resonated with me. In fact, has impacted how I think through and how I communicate the messages I speak. And that is that you don't have to understand everything to believe something. And that's an important thing. That's an important thing to say to the nones that are part of your congregation. That's an important thing to say to the people that are Adventists that are part of your congregation. Because if you got to understand everything, let's be honest, folks, there is a lot of stuff to understand, right? I mean, just start with the 7 seals, right? You got to understand those things. And the bowls, and the trumpets, and the days. And that's just the serve, right? I mean, you got to go deep and all this kind of stuff. And if somebody says, I got to understand, not just understand, I got to believe it. No, you just have to believe in something. And our job, at least at New Hope, when we preach messages, is to give them something to believe in. Something that this next week will stick with them and help them get through whatever they're facing, that remind them that God loves them, that God's active in their life, that God's doing something in and for them. Right? This is what we typically have when somebody comes to our church. You got to believe, And then you got to behave, and then you can, right? You got to get the beliefs right. And then we got to make sure those beliefs are right in your life, that you're starting to behave right, that you've stopped all that and you've started doing this, right? And then, only then, can you belong. But what would happen if we switched it around? New Hope has a great history. Much before I got there, it's had for years and years this great approach to ministry that is about helping people belong before they behave, before they even believe. In fact, one of the things we try to do the quickest is that if you showed up, we want to get you involved in a ministry. We'll make you a greeter. Because you don't have to understand a lot of details to be a greeter. In fact, you don't even have to say Happy Sabbath to be a greeter, because I hate Happy Sabbath. Because Happy Sabbath communicates to those nones, oh my, I don't have any idea what these folks are doing. I understand happy, but Sabbath, I'm not sure what this is about. I'd rather have them say, good morning. We're glad you're here. And so we get you involved because we know if we get you involved, you feel a connection to things, you start meeting some other folks. There's just some great stuff that happens. I mean, you have lots of places you can put somebody who's not a member. And what we've discovered over the years is that when people belong and have that sense of belonging, they begin to behave, they begin to believe. See, people have a hard time believing you love them when you act like you don't even like them. And we say to them, no, you can't do that yet. You got to get this fixed first. You got to get that fixed first. And we have our list of the fixes, right? And we have the list of the things that we don't ever fix. Potluck's a great example of that, isn't it? Gluttony, pride, self-righteousness, which, by the way, Ellen White says is the worst of them all. You can be that till the day you die as an Adventist. But what would happen in your church? And this is the great thing, that I'm expecting that I'm speaking primarily to pastors here. As Emil said, this is true. You're the one that has the mic. Because you have the mic, you get to set the tone. And because you have the mic, you can begin to change the culture. Because you have the mic, you can change the statement from we can't do that to why can't we do that? The thing I would encourage you to do as you think of how you treat people is to trust the process. My Bible tells me that God so loved the... Now, I ought to get on board with God and love them as well. But God already loves them. In fact, we're reminded that He who has begun this good work in you will... He's going to carry it to completion, right? Who's going to do it? Right? Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. We need to trust the process more than we do. Time is on your side. Because we often think time is not on our side. We got to get them through, right? You know, we got to push them through. We got to get them in the tank. I mean, I came up in a system where I don't know where I picked it up, but somewhere along the line I got in my mind that my job, if you showed up, Dave, at my church, was to make sure I got a connection with you, talk with you, get you into Bible studies. And my job was not completed. My job was not successful until I got Dave in the baptismal tank. You can only go so many years with that kind of expectation on you before you finally say, this is not for me. But what if? What if you trusted God? What if you believed that what God said was true? That the one who's begun to work not only in you, but in that person, He's going to carry it to completion. Now, you can be helpful to it. It's a good doctor to remind us. You can also be not so helpful to it, right? That's why you need to think about these things. And not only trust the process, you need to be a tool. And some of you are already good about this. Right? We all know some tools. But to think of yourself as just simply that. I'm just simply a tool in God's hands. And most of us are not Swiss Army knives. In fact, the ones of us who think that we're Swiss Army knives are not normally that sharp. I may just be a screwdriver. I may just be a wrench. But my job is maybe just to do that. Maybe my job is for this person. It's just to help them get just a little step closer to Jesus, and maybe they go on to some other spots. But to trust the process and to simply be a tool. And our touches is it's all about opportunity. One of the things I discovered years ago that we as Adventists are terrible about is about repeating opportunities. We typically say this is the only time. We're having this guest in town. We're having this evangelism. This is the only time you can experience this. Oh, you should have been there. It was so great, but it's never coming back again. You know how many people that we have not made a connection with simply because it was a one-time opportunity? And how many times in your life have you missed an opportunity because you were just too busy? Or you were sick, or your kids were sick, or your kids had a school paper, big project due tomorrow, and they haven't told you tonight, right? And it blows up that great opportunity. It's really about opportunities. There's a thing I learned from Rick Warren years ago called the 5 circles of connection, right? And all of us have these in our churches. We have the community, and everybody in the community is out there somewhere, right? We all live in some kind of community, work in some kind of community. And our job is to give people an opportunity to move from the community, not to the core, but to move from the community to the crowd. And so no matter what kind of event you have, just get people in your doors. We host a Christian counseling organization. We give them free space. And we do it because we think it's a great thing. We think it's helpful to have a Christian counselor we can recommend people to that's right in our building. But we also recognize that people come through the door that have no connection to our church. They don't have a connection to any church. And what we're hoping is they've moved, in our group, they've moved from the community to the crowd, and that's a win. My job is not just to get them to the core. My job is just to help them move one step and to give them some opportunities. My job is not to do anything more than give them opportunities. And so move people from the crowd to the church, same kind of thing. From the church to the committed, same kind of thing. From the committed to the core, same kind of thing. It's about opportunities. And here's how we do it at New Hope. We offer repeating opportunities. Every week we try to have a relevant, meaningful worship service. We try to keep that bar high every week because we want people to know that they can invite somebody, that it's a safe place, that it's all going to be okay, and that they're going to be consistent. I preach the vast majority of my time in our church. We have 4 pastors on staff. The other 3, they hardly get to speak at all. And they understand that. Because a lot of studies have been done, they have discovered that having a consistent voice, even if it's not the best voice, but a consistent voice lets people know what's going to expect, what to expect. So when I invite you to come, I know who's going to be up there, what it's going to be like. I'm not worrying about, I haven't heard this person before. What's that going to be like? And then now I have to explain to my friend over lunch. And I'm wishing I hadn't brought them home for lunch now because I don't want to explain what they were meant and what they were talking about. We do repeating events. We have a church every week. It's care every week. We try to do a quality job there. So every week we keep coming back, doing that again and again and again. We do a big event at Christmas and Easter. And the reason we do that is most people in our nation know about Christmas and Easter, right? And the great thing about it, we try to tell the story of Jesus. We do it through this very dramatic thing at Easter, a little bit lighter hearted, a little more carols at Christmas. But our whole goal is to try to get that opportunity to connect with our community, a very safe place. We don't ask for an offering. We don't make an altar call. We just simply say, we're glad you showed up. And we're glad that you're giving us the opportunity to tell what we think is the greatest story that can be told. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to tell you the story. And then we tell the story. We have this thing. And we do it, in our Easter program, we hire local actors. The guy that plays Jesus is not a Seventh-day Adventist. Everybody say, oh my. I'm going to work Emil's thing here. Everybody say, oh my, right? The guy that plays the devil is not an Adventist. Everybody say amen. But I needed somebody that could play Jesus and do it well. And I found a great guy here locally. And we pay him. And here's the great thing. I know by hiring those 2 actors that they're going to bring their friends into a Seventh-day Adventist church that would normally not come into a Seventh-day Adventist church. Because they will come to watch Fred perform as the devil, to watch Ben perform as Jesus. I'm friends with them on Facebook. I see the advertisements they send out to their friends, to their non-friends. And the great thing is, the guy that plays Jesus, he considers our church his church. He's a believer. But he has a crazy busy life. He's a teacher in Baltimore City. On the weekends, he works at a gym. He's a big buff guy. And he does acting as well. So he is really, he loves to come. He comes and he hangs around at our church. We'll be done. I'm leaving the building. I'm normally the last guy out. So we do these repeating opportunities. And the great thing is we've done the same Christmas and Easter program every year. For 6 years, the exact same one. And people are like, well, hey, how come you don't do different ones all the time? A couple of reasons. One is just how it typically works. Do you know that Ford's Theater down in Washington, D.C. has done a Christmas carol for more than 2 decades? Why don't they change it up at Christmas? And the reason is people go there because it's part of their Christmas tradition. And we want to become part of their Christmas tradition. The other behind-the-scenes honest look is that it's much easier. Because if I can get 60 to 70% of the people that participated last year, practices go so much quicker. They don't got to learn a whole new role. So offering repeating opportunities, not making this is the only time, but this is an opportunity. And next year it comes around, it's another opportunity. Not only offer repeating opportunities, encourage personal commitments. We are always asking people to step up. But our step-ups are always small step-ups instead of trying to make these big step-ups. We'll ask people, hey, come check this out. You want to be, let's come be a greeter. Just check it out. Come next week. Try it out. See what you think of it. And if it goes good for you and it goes good for our leader, our greeter leader, we'll say, hey, why don't you come back and why don't you try it the third Sabbath of the month. You say, okay, you come back, you do it 2 months. Then we come back and say, okay, hey, how'd it go? It went great. Leader says it went great. How about you commit to 6 months? If you're doing the math, we're at 9 months now. That we've got somebody to commit to that without them even recognizing they've signed up for something long term. But it's always about commitments. Taking a step closer to Jesus. Here's another touch we do at the end of the service. We pass around the offering plates and we tell folks that if it's their first time with us, we don't expect them to put any money in that. All we ask them to do is put a Connect card in there. And the Connect card is something by a guy named Nelson Searcy. Anybody ever heard of Nelson Searcy? Okay, quite a few of you. He's got a bunch of books on a bunch of stuff. Very practical, very method-oriented guy, systems guy. And I love systems. Great system. His idea is if you get regular visitors, but you don't have any way to capture their data, you lose an opportunity. So here's what a Connect card looks like. Can you see all that? All right. This is a little better, all right? So we find out, is this your first time visiting? And how'd you hear about this church? They may have said, I discovered the website. I have a friend that told me about this, coworker, whatever. We'd like to just kind of know what's going on. We get their information at the top, how many times they've been visiting. Oftentimes we discover that we get this Connect card on number 4 through number 8 of when somebody has attended. Rarely do we get it first time, but that's okay. And then we give them a chance to respond. Every week we get people that'll mark some of these. It's a great way to find out about people that have an interest in being baptized or wanting to study, being part of this church, helping at this church. We regularly get people saying, I want to help at this church, which feeds us into our volunteer. And so here's what would happen. If you came to my church this week, you filled out a Connect card. On Monday, you would get an email from us that just says, hey, we're glad you came. Tuesday, after staff meetings, whoever was the main speaker, which means most likely me, is going to handwrite a note to you that'll simply say this. Hi, Celeste. It was great to have you with us at New Hope this past Saturday, parentheses, Sabbath. We hope your time with us was meaningful and relevant to your life and that you had a good time too. Here's a free coupon, a free card for whatever you want to have, a Starbucks card. I try to buy books from the ABC that are good and that are on sale because I'm cheap and I like to have a big stuff. But it's a book I've read, I've previewed. I think this is a good to give to somebody, and we say, here's a free free coupon for a book that I think you will find helpful to your faith journey. So next time you're with us, bring the Connect card or bring the card and you get your free book. I tell them, hope to see you again soon. Have a great week. Pastor Mike. So they get a handwritten thing. A month later, they get a letter from us that just says, hey, Celeste, it was good to have you with us this past month. And just want to let you know what's going on. And we'll talk about whatever the message series coming up. If there's some big event or some serving opportunity we have. It's an easy system once you get it set up, but it's just a system to work. And to help turn these people that are attending into known commodities, who you know, how you know, what you know about them, and help them get connected. Another thing besides Connect Card, at the end of our services, we do what's called 7 minutes or less. And this is just simply a chance to tell folks, hey, if you want to know a little bit more about New Hope, come up front on the front left side. And in 7 minutes or less, we're going to tell you about us. It's a chance to talk about our core values. It's a chance to give them sort of my terminology, a speed dating experience. This is who we are. You're kind of cute. You think I'm kind of cute. Let's see if this is going to work for us kind of moment, all right? It's just enough to kind of help them understand, but not enough to get them too far. But just another bump to go along. So now we're into the bonus round. Frank, I have time for bonus round? 5 minutes. All right, here we go. Bonus round. This is something I discovered, a great process to think through. Whenever you're thinking about starting some ministry or keeping it going, here are the 3 things. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the right time to do it? And do I have the right people? How many times have you done something you thought was the right thing and it was the right time, but you did not have the right people? Anybody else? And you know how great that worked, right? Or it was the right time. It seemed like the right time. It seemed like the right thing and the right people, but the timing, nobody showed up. And you're thinking, what happened, right? A simple process, I learned this years ago, and everything we evaluate, this is our intentionality, everything we evaluate through, is it the right thing? Has to be the right thing. Is it the right time? Because sometimes it isn't the right time. And do I have the right people? Because if I don't have the right people, it's going to come off as not so good. And I want to do stuff well. Because I know that people interpret what God is like through the people who put on things and how things go. Another thing. Do less better. If I could give you any advice I've learned over the years, do less better. So often it's about adding more things, and we need to have this. And you have these lovely people in your church who will come to you and say, Pastor, we need to have a prison ministry. Pastor, we need to go to the local nursing home. Yeah, we. Which always means you, not me, right? But if you're intentional, if you know you're wise, you're able to say, that's a great thing, but that's not what we have the time and energy to do. We're focusing on these things. Figure out what you do and do well, because everybody does everything well. Figure out the things you do well as a church and do those things even better. Don't keep adding, keep subtracting, keep focusing, and do less better. Find some community partners. Find somebody in your community that's doing something well and partner with them. Send them resources, send them people to help with them, send them money. We regularly support a number of community partners. We have people that go and feed people one Sabbath a month at our local homeless shelter, the crisis center. We have people that serve on a suicide hotline. We have people that go to another facility that's over by Fort Meade, that's a Army base that has some needs over there. We regularly collect food for a bunch of food banks. We don't have our own community service because there's already a bunch of good ones in the system and in the community. And so we want to go support them. We want to go be part of them. Why not go be part of something that's already working instead of trying to compete with them? You can't impact your community unless you're part of your community. And I'm going to end on this because we're in the Adventist meeting and we got to have a little Ellen White. Lift him up, page 98. You may not have read this before, but it ought to impact how you do evangelism, how you think about church. The shortness of time is frequently urged as an incentive for seeking righteousness and making Christ our friend. Do you find that true in your life? Have you heard about the shortness of time being the moment? This is the time before it's too late. Get in the door. Is it necessary that the terrors of the day of God should be held before us, that we may be compelled to right action through fear? Is that what God's after, is fear to move people? I mean, let's be honest. Fear is a great motivator, right? Short-term motivator. But to have it long-term, there comes a point where people just... I love how she finishes up. It ought not to be so. Not the way to do it, folks. Jesus is attractive. He is full of love, mercy, and compassion. And he proposes to be our friend. And what if he proposes not just to be our friend, but the friend of your neighbor, of your dentist, of the person around the block who always brings their dog to your yard and lets him do his stuff in your yard and never seems to have the bag to pick up after that? What if that's true?